Welcome to Look, Think, Click. Have you ever stopped to think about how amazing our eyes are and how wonderful it is to see? I think about it quite often. How incredible it is to be able to see light reflecting off objects, reflecting off things, and passing through our eyes, through our cornea, through our lens, hitting the retina, being flipped the right way up and given meaning by our brains. It's pretty amazing, really. And our cameras are basically set up the same way to record images. But there's big differences in the way this happens. The technology in our cameras these days is phenomenally good compared to what it used to be. 36 megapixels in this camera, so the quality of image it's able to capture is really quite astounding. And even on my phone, this is a 16 megapixel camera on this phone. The images from it are stunning, and particularly in low light, it's really quite incredible. This phone is capable of doing higher quality images than any film I've ever used could do. But the quality of what we're getting from our cameras, no matter how good it is still limited compared to what we see. And if we can have an appreciation and gain an understanding of the differences between what we see and the way that our camera records images, we will be better photographers. Looking at light, looking at the way we see, and understanding that our eyes are constantly adjusting, our pupils open and close dynamically depending on how much light there is, and our lenses in our eyes change shape so that we can see clearly all the time, whether we're looking close or whether we're looking into the distance. And sure, our cameras and our lenses are fabulously created these days, are so well made, and the settings on them are so diverse that we can capture a really broad range of light in a single image, but not nearly as broad as we can see. And this is one of the fundamental differences. If you can learn to see the way your camera sees and learn to appreciate that it's seeing a narrower dynamic range than what our eyes can see, that way you'll be able to have a better understanding of what your camera is going to capture and how the resulting images will look. So I'm constantly looking at the light when I'm taking photographs and when I'm preparing to shoot, and I'll be adjusting and evaluating and seeing the way the light is reflecting off different things, or if I'm including particularly part of the sky and say if there's some dark shadow, I know on a sunny day my camera's not going to be able to record all of the detail in the sky and all of the detail in the shadow areas. And so I'm adjusting my composition, but adjusting my exposure, balancing those things so I can get a nice evenly exposed image. Our eyes don't capture a single image like our camera does, and this is part of the limitation when you're working with a camera. The more that you can have an understanding of the dynamic range that your camera is capable of recording, like that's the amount of the darkest and the brightest value that your camera can record and show detail in reasonably well. If we're out photographing on a sunny day, our eyes can easily see the detail in the brightest areas of what we're looking at and the shadow areas of what we're looking at. But quite often when we take a photograph, if there's really bright and really dark areas, our camera's not going to be able to record the whole dynamic range of tone evenly and correctly. We're going to lose detail maybe in our shadows or maybe in our highlights. So the more we have an understanding of the tonal range that we're looking at, of the way our eyes are seeing it as opposed to the way our cameras are seeing it, we can be more creative with our photography. So by that, what I mean is that if you're looking at an image, if you're looking to create an image, say outdoors on a sunny day, you have to compose carefully and choose your angle carefully so that your dynamic range is not beyond what your camera can handle. Even though our eyes can see it all clearly, our camera is not going to be able to. So if you're out shooting and you compose your images, you choose your point of view, you choose your lens carefully to compose shots where the tonal range and what you're photographing fits within the tonal range of what your camera is capable of. Like I said, nowadays this is far broader than it ever used to be with film. Film, we were much more limited in what we could record and what our dynamic range of the film was. Our camera's sensors, whether it's on our DSLR or our phone or whatever we're using, these days is far more capable of recording a wider dynamic range, a wider range of tone from the brightest until the darkest, but it is still limited. And it's going to be probably a number of years before it gets as good as our eyes are. Understanding what might be seen as limitations of a camera and exploiting them can also help us to be more creative with our photography. For example, if your subject is moving, you will be able to make photographs of it that we can't see with our eyes. Using a slower shutter speed with the object moving across the frame or in the frame, you'll be capable of producing motion blur. And this is something we never see with our eyes if our eyes are good. And alternatively, use an extremely fast shutter speed to be able to freeze the motion, particularly with water or smoke or fire, things that are translucent. So they can be a lot of fun to play with either a fast shutter speed to freeze the motion or a slow shutter speed to let the motion blur, and create images that can only be created with photographs that we cannot actually see the same results when we're looking at them with our eyes, because our eyes are not going to see the motion blur, or, for example, like this water that's just frozen in mid-air. So these are capabilities that our camera has that our eyes don't have. And of course, another major difference with photography than the way we see is depth of field. If our eyes are good, we never naturally see depth of field, but as photographers, we love to use it. We love to give this beautiful, soft background to our images, to isolate our portrait subjects from the background, and to be able to really help our compositions by drawing the viewer's eye right to the exact place that we want them to be looking at. So being aware of what we see being different than how our cameras see will help us to be more creative in our photography. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got lots of great videos up there already, and there's more on the way.